To me, one of the most inspiring things about Quakers is that it is about what we do and how we kind of live in the world and try to make things different.
Quakers show up. I think that's a very important thing about is Quakers show up for others. It's not just showing up for other Quakers, it's just showing up for human or anyone.
I am really involved in social justice movements and human rights activism and animal rights activism and all of these spaces, and coming back to Quakers has connected me with other people who are also in those spaces.
I like the aspect that Quakers are kind of socially active. They are engaged in, I think in terms of proportion, there are more Quakers engaged, socially active, take issue in social issues, justice and things like that. And I like that aspect. They are a bit like warriors. And this is not entirely political. It's based on spiritual life. And they go together. They must go together.
I think I've probably always been an activist. I remember part of what prompted me to become a member was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I was like so against them. My mother was a big anti-war toys campaigner, and I got a bee in my bonnet about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and how much all of my peers loved them and how terrible they were. So my memory says that I organised like a kind of a gathering at my meeting to talk about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and kind of how terrible this was. So I think I've always had that in me.
I'm still blown away by the wackiness of Quakers. You know, you'll have a chat with an 80-year-old Quaker and they'll tell you a story about their life and you're like, really? Like, people have done some weird and wonderful stuff, you know, because yeah, I think a lot of us are adventurers, or you know, always wanting to be out there doing and helping and learning.
We are a very experiential faith, and we believe that the way we walk the walk is absolutely as important, if not more important, than what we say. And so how we live in the world, being witness to the things we do believe in, to the loving way. So for example, with immigration, we're strong believers in supporting migrants and refugees, and we believe that all people bring beautiful and important treasures into our culture. In my
20s, I tried to exhaust myself being on top of every issue and doing every political action that I could do. I've since learned that that's not sustainable, it's just exhausting. So I've tried to be smarter about it as I grow older. I'm not necessarily totally wise about it now. Think about what are the issues that I'm most passionate about. So I guess in the last 10 years that's been mostly climate change, the environment, LGBT issues, partly out of that kind of personal experience, but also around race and indigeneity.
Growing up, obviously in a community of people who are conscious objectors, that was my experience as a Quaker. I was around a lot of people that were conscious objectors. I was around people that were active in the community, who were always looking to better others beyond themselves. And so that's kind of like what I take to, like, as in, that's my attitude towards the world, is that you have to be not just kind of go with the flow, but also be a participant, an active participant.
I'm hoping to bring Australian Quakers' attention to the issue of peace in North Korea, which, you know, Australian Quakers are fairly informed about issues in the Middle East, Palestine, and so on, but very little about North Korea. I have to think about me as an individual, as a kind of spiritual being. How do I handle this? Then I have to think about people who have different opinion about this matter, and how do I engage with them peacefully and coming up with agreeable and move towards a positive direction.
Yes,
a lot to do.
I'm involved with Extinction Rebellion, and so, which is about non-violent direct action. And I believe in government, and I believe that government should look after their citizens, and I believe that that is not necessarily what's happening here for a long time. I think, you know, Australia has a long and troubled history as a colonising kind of nation. And so for me, being an activist is about working for climate change in a way that is also about working for climate justice for First Nations people and for people of colour. And really, I think what's happened in the last, I mean, particularly in the last 12 months, has really kind of brought all that into people's consciousness. And so part of it is about being out on the street and getting involved in actions, and part of it is about learning more. And about educating myself about the inequality in climate change and how it disproportionately affects people.
I now see what I do as being part of my spiritual path much more. I'm no longer an activist and a spiritual person. I am a kind of spiritual activist. I've never framed it in those terms, but I, you know, in the way that Quakers do, trying to see the fundamental truth behind the kind of the curtain that we see in this world. You know, I want to see to not just what's the immediate issue in this activism, but what's the world we really want, you know. Like with gender equality, I don't just want maternity leave or better childcare or whatever. I want every person fundamentally to feel safe.
In some ways, I think where we are in the world is inevitable because of the way that we're living in the world. And so I definitely feel the rage about the world. And I do what I can to kind of be out in the world. And also I'm learning that how I be and how I look after myself and how I disengage is just as important, because that sustains me.
I'm way more idealistic than I was. I was probably a more pragmatic activist. My Quakerism makes me supremely idealistic. As Quakers, we believe that we are trying to bring heaven on earth, the kingdom of heaven here on earth, that's not sort of pie in the sky when you die. There's, you know, we can make the world a better place.
Yes, we as Quakers can do stuff, but not alone. It's always important to have friends everywhere.
Whenever there is conflict and there has been turmoil in the world, there's been a Quaker somewhere amongst it holding a space and being active.
What point is there if you believe in something and live differently?